So, hello everybody. Society's secret parasite, otherwise known as the UK's mental health crisis. How are you? It's a question that we are always asking, but as a society, have we made it rhetorical? Are we really asking, or do we fear giving a truthful answer? If it's the latter, is it due to what I call society's secret parasite, stigma? Consider this for just a moment. If every time someone asked you how you were every day, you lifted the load just slightly by fighting the fear and freeing your feelings, would it change anything? I think so. I'm not here to argue that all our feelings can be fixed by a compassionately asked question or a heartfelt open response. However, I am here to point out the parasitic, necrotic, and virulent outcomes the unintentional ignorance is having on society. We must take the small actions that are in our control to suppress society's stigma. Do we really have a crisis? I know some people, if you haven't been touched by a mental health crisis, may think not. But just like the illness itself, most of the effects of the crisis lay camouflaged within the daily workings of the world or suppressed by some sparkling, superficial social media facade. The bitter truth is that the proposition that we are in the grips of a crisis is undeniable, and the statistics support this. Mental health problems account for 28% of the burden of disease in the UK. To compare this with more publicly recognised requirements, both cancer and heart disease each carry a burden of only 16% in comparison. So 28% of something that's not massively recognised compared to 16% on something that we all fear massively. 1 in 4 people in the UK will experience mental health difficulties that could require intervention, according to mentalhealth.gov. Mental health services in the UK are overstretched. They have long waiting times and in some regions they lack specialist services. In the UK, the cost to the taxpayer of mental health problems is around £100 billion each year. In 2020, a study for NHS England estimated a rise in this cost to around £140 billion each year. Now, this doesn't take into account the recent effects of the global coronavirus pandemic, which we know has had a huge impact on people's mental health. This is further supported by a previous study by the British Medical Association, who concluded that things are getting worse, not better. In fact, it says that there's been an increase in the number of patients being sent out of area for treatment due to the lack of capacity, detailing a rise of nearly 40% between 2016 and 2019. Whilst these may just seem like facts and figures, it's only a matter of time before this becomes unsustainable. There's only a matter of time before it affects the economy, not because of the spending, but because of the link between mental and physical health. Whilst we know people suffering from some mental health difficulties battle on in silence, continuing to attempt a normal life, the effects of suffering poor mental health are soon collaborated with poor physical health. This means that someone who is a long-term sufferer is more likely to become unemployed, reliant on additional services, and just be totally secluded from society. Research for the World Health Organization reported that 30% of people with a long-term physical health problem also have a mental health problem, and 46% of people with a mental health problem also had a long-term physical health problem. This supports the undeniable link between the two. The problems will catch up with each other. Mixed anxiety and depression is the most common mental health disorder in Britain, with 7.8% of people meeting the criteria for a diagnosis. 4 to 10% of people in England will experience depression in their lifetime. So why do we have a crisis, and what are the contributing factors? I mean, there's lifestyle and there's work, diet, drugs, and a lack of sleep. All these things can affect your mental health. And there are many economic reasonings as well as to why people may suffer from these certain factors. However, if you experience a mental health problem, there are usually other factors that come along with it. The main causes are linked to having a long-term physical health condition, as I said, severe or long-term stress, or possibly losing someone close to you. Social poverty and debt, childhood abuse, social isolation, loneliness, I can go on. All of these things are pointed out by experts to be a cause of suffering. And I believe that a prolonged reason for the suffering is the stigma. If we didn't battle on so long in silence, maybe we would be able to overcome these. So what is stigma? The parasitic form of discrimination is ingrained in our worries. Fear and restraints in coming forward are a huge problem for many suffering from poor mental health. Social stigma and discrimination can make mental health problems worse and stop a person from getting the help that they need. The magnitude mark of shame carelessly carried by society doesn't even need to be spoken to impact on a sufferer's strength. It should never be underestimated how much it takes to speak openly, seek help, and strive for success over the all-consuming dark clouds of depression. Why parasite? Why do I call it a parasite? Well, let me just tell you what a parasite is. A parasite is an organism that lives on or in a host organism. Sounds a bit scientific there, doesn't it? And gets its food from or at the expense of its host. Basically, drains you dry. Remind you of anything? The social stigma that lives in the minds of sufferers restrains, ruins, and rips through any ounce of strength that is built up. It's my belief that most of the stigma is secret. It's often preempted concerns and far from what would have actually have happened if the emotions had been uncaged or you'd spoken out. Whilst there will always be judgment from some form, and most of the stigma and worries are internal, they're your responsibility that we burden ourselves with. In my mind, the responsibility lays with us all to normalise this natural health experience. Health is health, be it mental or otherwise, and the responsibility to poison this parasite with positivity lays with you, me, and every other person who one day might find themselves in the parasite's grip. Christina Welsh found herself isolated from her normal lifestyle and friends when suffering an injury. This led to suicidal thoughts, feelings of worthlessness, and a lacking inability to see a route out of these emotions. She now talks openly about how the regret of not talking to someone sooner is a longer lasting burden than the temporary lows of suffering during this time. It nearly ended in the scariest ways for Christina. Self-applied or socially summoned stigma lives rent-free in all our minds. Let's strive not to let it shelter there any longer, please. In a moment, obviously, I'll happily take any questions, and thank you so much for listening. But first, I've got something I want to ask you. This is heartfelt, sincere, and really meant to be answered. If not verbally, then maybe just check in with yourself. How are you? I don't have all the answers, but we know that there will always be battles. We can't all perform heart surgery or reset a broken bone, but we can all communicate, care, and we can all show compassion. Health is health, be it mental or otherwise. So from this moment on, let us all poison the parasite with positivity. Thank you for listening.